On June 15th, the BOMA Project, a Kenya and U.S.-based nonprofit that has its roots in Manchester and aims to empower African women to establish sustainable livelihoods and graduate from extreme poverty, got the kind of news that every nonprofit philanthropic organization would like to hear. They would be receiving a $10 million donation from MacKenzie Scott, a philanthropist who is in the process of giving away a large fortune to philanthropic organizations whose work she wishes to support. Scott's $10 million gift to BOMA was part of a broader $2.74 billion in financial support she was making to almost 300 such organizations, a second round of gift-giving that has targeted nonprofits that have often flown under the radar of other philanthropic donors. One of the co-founders of BOMA in 2008 was Kathleen Colson, a Dorset resident who saw a need to help impoverished African women and focused on those in Kenya and Eastern Africa. Since then, the organization has grown considerably and is now based in Washington, D.C. But it still has links to the Green Mountain State, and one of them is Stephen Kelly, their chief financial officer, who spoke to us from his home in Vermont, as well as Cherise Forbes, a former editor and writer with the Manchester Journal, who is now their communications and marketing manager, and who helped set up the conversation with Mr. Kelly.
So BOMA's mission has stayed the same, which is to empower women by establishing sustainable livelihoods. So, I mean, if you put it in terms of a common phrase used in the US, to give a hand up rather than a handout. I mean, the important thing for us is prosperity through dignity. And so we basically, we work with women. From the beginning, we've chosen to work with women because women are the marginalized people in their community. Quite honestly, working in communities where ultra poverty is the norm rather than the exception. You have half of your population not being given opportunity to contribute in a way that allows them to feed and care for their families. So we've chosen to work with women from the beginning, and as a result, the women are given money through a grant and then mentoring and business training. And we're talking about, in relative terms, a small amount, $100 per participant or $300 per business. And that's enough for women to establish a small business, usually the equivalent of a kiosk or a small shop within their community, so they can buy wholesale and then sell in retail to the people in their community. Or it's enough for them to purchase a couple of goats and start a livelihood raising goats. And the interesting thing about that is traditionally women have not been able to purchase or raise goats or livestock. In the communities that we work in the drylands of Africa, they're pastoralist communities, and the men in those communities have traditionally been the ones who raise cattle or raise goats, go in search of grazing, and the women are left to fend for themselves. So what we've enabled women to do is establish their own livelihood, create a second source of income for the household, and they then are able to make decisions in terms of how that money is spent. So they spend primarily on feeding their families. For a mother, as most people would know, the number one concern is their children. So they spend that money on feeding their families and then saving for emergencies such as school fees. That work is extremely valuable, but BOMA is seen as being in there for the long haul. When we enter a community, we're there for at least 2 years, and in northern Kenya, we've been there for over 10 years now. So that's a big difference between us and other aid agencies, and it's how our reputation precedes us. So the big thing that $10 million allows you to do is build capacity. So, and I'm not talking about capacity just building, employing people for the sake of employing people, but rather we have realized that what we have is a very workable model of development aid. And it's been recognized by other large organizations. So we've partnered with Mercy Corps. We're currently partnering with Caritas Switzerland, working with them in Chad and Uganda. So ultimately what you need to do to eradicate extreme poverty is to have programs such as ours adopted by governments. Agencies such as large international non-government organizations can achieve great impact, but ultimately it's governments that move the needle the largest. So if you look at the reduction of extreme poverty in the world, China and India have both made great strides. Sub-Saharan Africa has not. It's the only part of the world where extreme poverty is still rising. And COVID and the implications of COVID, the inability to travel and so forth have had an impact. And extreme poverty has risen and is still rising in Sub-Saharan Africa. So $10 million allows us to work with other organizations, go to new countries for us, but not as an organization where we think we can just come in and do what we did in Kenya somewhere else. We want to work with partners who are already there, who already have the infrastructure on the ground, because that's the most efficient way. They see us as a technical advisor. We work with them to train their staff in using a model that has been proven to work. I mean, that's the most important thing. BOMA is, because of what we've done and how we measure the impact of what we've done, we punch well above our weight. The gift from MacKenzie Scott acknowledges that. It really does. I mean, we've worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the past. We were one of only 17 organizations to win a competitive grant out of several thousand applicants. And this gift from MacKenzie Scott is further validation of what we do and will allow us to work with other large organizations and win grants from the US government, from the British government, from USAID, through UK aid, and so forth, and work with local governments. We're working with the Kenyan government. Our model is now part of a program in several counties in Kenya, not just in the north. And we are partnering with Mercy Corps again and other aid organizations in bringing our version of sustainable livelihood creation to a point where the government can incorporate it as part of their hunger safety network program.
In 2018, Kathleen Colson stepped down from her role with BOMA as CEO, but remains involved in the organization by serving on its board of directors and as a special advisor. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.